Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. The room went silent the second those words left her mouth. We were sitting at her parents' dining table, the polished wood shining under the chandelier, plates of untouched roast chicken steaming in front of us. And she smirked. Not nervous, not embarrassed. A smirk. Then she said it. I regret listening to my heart and choosing him. Her parents froze mid-bite. Her father's fork clinked against the plate. Her mother's smile collapsed into something caught between shock and pity. I didn't say a word. I just stood up slowly, every eye at that table following me. When I looked at her, she realized too late that this was no longer just a dinner. It was the moment everything changed. I didn't storm out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I let the silence stretch until it cut deeper than any insult she could throw. Then I left the table, walked through that perfect suburban home, and stepped outside into the cold air. Her words replayed in my head, not like an echo, but like a verdict. She wanted to humiliate me in front of her family. She wanted to put me on trial without defense. Fine. She had just handed me the clarity I didn't know I was waiting for. The ride home was quiet. She stayed behind with her parents. I didn't text, didn't call. I drove through the city lights, past the restaurants we used to visit, past the streets where we once held hands, and I felt nothing. No heartbreak, no panic, just a cold resolve settling in. That night, I sat in the living room with the lamp off, my phone buzzing with her messages I didn't answer. She said she was joking. She said I was overreacting. She said her parents understood what she really meant. I let the phone buzz until it went still. What she didn't know was that by the time she got back home, I had already started. Documents out of the safe, financial statements copied, passwords changed. I wasn't scrambling. I was preparing. She walked in close to midnight, her heels clicking against the tile, her tone somewhere between annoyed and nervous. She asked why I'd left so abruptly. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the woman I thought I married. I saw a stranger who had just burned the last bridge. That night, I slept soundly. Not beside her. I stayed in the guest room. While she tossed and turned in the master bedroom, I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, already calculating my next steps. She thought I would be humiliated, broken, desperate for an apology. She thought I would fight for her approval, for her affection, for the illusion of control she dangled in front of me. But she was wrong. Because here's the truth she didn't see coming. I wasn't retreating. I was exiting. And by the time she realized it, it would already be too late. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. Sunlight poured through the blinds, the smell of her coffee filling the kitchen, and she sat there scrolling on her phone like the night before had been erased. She didn't mention the dinner. She didn't mention my silence. She just gave me a look, expecting me to pick up the routine, to move past it the way I always had. But I didn't. I poured my own coffee, sat at the opposite end of the table, and didn't say a word. For the first time, she had to fill the silence herself, and it made her restless. At work, I couldn't concentrate. Not because I was angry, but because I had already decided. I replayed her smirk in front of her parents, the way she used me as the punchline to a cruel joke, and I knew that whatever love I thought was left had just evaporated. She had crossed a line she didn't even know existed. That night, I didn't rush home. I stayed late at the office, went to the gym, took the long route back. When I finally walked through the door, she was waiting in the living room. Makeup on. Hair done. She had set the table with takeout like it was some attempt at peace. She said she thought we could eat together. I nodded, sat down, and ate. No compliments. No small talk. Just silence that grew heavier with every passing second. She tried to laugh, to make light conversation, but my answers were short. Polite. Detached. She asked if I was upset. I said I was fine. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me, like I was slipping through her fingers without making a sound. And that's when I saw it, the first flicker of doubt in her eyes. The first sign she understood she had lost something she couldn't control. Over the next few days, I let the silence grow. I stopped reaching for her hand when we passed in the hallway. Stopped asking how her day was. Stopped making an effort. She noticed. She came into the bedroom one night wearing lingerie she hadn't touched in months. I told her I was tired and turned away. She froze, then quietly slid under the covers, her body tense with confusion. The woman who once believed she held all the power was beginning to feel the weight of her own emptiness. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply became absent while still being there. And that absence was louder than anything I could have said. For the first time in years, the balance had shifted. And she hated it, because she thought she could humiliate me in front of her parents and walk away unscathed. What she didn't realize was that she hadn't embarrassed me. She had freed me. It didn't take long before the cracks started to show. 3 days after the dinner, she called me in the middle of the workday. She never called unless it was something urgent. Her voice was soft, almost forced, like she was trying to sound casual. She said she just wanted to hear my voice. I paused, asked if everything was okay. She laughed nervously, said she missed me. I didn't say it back. I let the silence stretch until she filled it with another laugh and quickly hung up. That was the moment I knew she wasn't reaching out for love. She was reaching out for control she suddenly realized was slipping away. That evening I got home later than usual. The house smelled of perfume and candles. The table was set, and she was dressed like we had dinner plans. Only we didn't. She smiled when I walked in and said she thought it would be nice if we went out somewhere, maybe talked a little. I took off my jacket slowly, told her I had already eaten. Her smile faltered, just for a second, before she forced it back into place. She said, maybe tomorrow then. I nodded once, said maybe, and walked past her. She didn't follow me. The next morning, she was waiting in the kitchen. She had cooked breakfast, something she hadn't done in months. Pancakes, bacon, the works. She looked proud, like she expected me to be grateful, to fall back into the rhythm she knew so well. I sat down, ate quietly, and thanked her. No compliments. No spark of joy. Just calm detachment. She kept glancing at me, waiting for me to say more, but I gave her nothing. When she reached across the table, her fingers brushed mine. I pulled my hand back as if I hadn't even noticed. That tiny rejection hit harder than any argument ever could. Later that week, I started moving money into a private account. Quietly, discreetly, with precision. Canceled subscriptions she loved, things she never knew I paid for. That night, she shouted from the living room that Netflix wasn't working. I didn't answer. She waited for me to fix it. I didn't move. I let her sit there in her confusion, realizing piece by piece that the world she thought she controlled was slipping out of her hands. And still, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I gave her politeness, silence, and absence. That was enough to shake her more than any fight could. She started sending me little texts during the day. Hope your morning's okay. What do you want for dinner? Miss you. I responded, but every word was stripped of warmth. Thanks. Doesn't matter. All good. Each message was a mirror, reflecting back the indifference she had shown me for years. She was unraveling, and I was only just beginning. It was subtle at first, but I noticed. She started hovering around me in ways she hadn't in years. Pretending to fold laundry that didn't need folding, lingering near my gym bag, glancing at receipts I tossed on the counter. One night I caught her in the laundry room, holding one of my shirts a little too long, checking the pockets like she was looking for something. She froze when I walked in, smiled awkwardly, and muttered something about helping. I didn't call her out. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her once and walked away. That silence rattled her more than any confrontation could. A few days later, I came home from the gym later than usual. She was sitting on the couch, TV on but volume low, pretending to watch while her eyes stayed fixed on me. She asked if I'd been out with someone. I shrugged, said I'd just been with people. That one word, people, hit her like a slap. She tried to mask it with a smile, but her jaw tightened, her hands gripping the throw pillow in her lap. She wasn't used to ambiguity. She wasn't used to me being unreadable, and now it was consuming her. That night, she tried a different tactic. She poured 2 glasses of wine and set them on the coffee table. She smiled, said she thought we could drink together, that we hadn't done that in a while. I looked at the wine, then at her, and then I stood up. I told her I was heading to bed. Her smile cracked, and for the first time I saw it, the fear. She quickly masked it, but it was too late. I'd already seen the panic in her eyes, the realization that the silence she had once weaponized was now cutting her instead. The next morning, she touched my arm lightly as I was putting on my shirt. I flinched, just enough for her to feel the rejection. She pulled her hand back as if burned. That tiny recoil was the first fracture she couldn't repair. And she knew it. She started sending me longer texts after that. Photos of our cat curled on a blanket. Messages about missing me. Casual reminders of things we used to share. I answered every one of them with the same detached calm. Short, clipped words that gave her nothing to hold on to. And the more I withdrew, the more desperate she became. She thought humiliating me at her parents' dinner table would leave me chasing her approval. Instead, it left her chasing mine. And the cruelest part? I wasn't running anymore. I was already gone. It didn't take long before she tried to pull in reinforcements. A week after the dinner disaster, her mother called me out of the blue. Her voice was careful, almost rehearsed, asking if everything was all right between us. She said her daughter had mentioned I'd been acting distant. I listened without interrupting, then simply replied that I was fine. I didn't defend myself, didn't explain, didn't shift the blame. I gave her nothing but calm silence, and it unsettled her more than any denial could. Later that night, she confronted me in the kitchen. She said her parents were worried about us, that I'd embarrassed her by leaving dinner early, that I was making her look bad. I let her words hang in the air, then nodded once, poured myself a glass of water, and walked out of the room. The look on her face told me everything. She wanted me to argue, to fight, to prove I still cared. But I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Over the next few days, she tried harder. She left notes on the counter, little reminders of things she used to do when we first started dating. A smiley face on a napkin, a sticky note with the words, "Thinking of you." I picked them up, read them once, then dropped them in the trash without a word. She watched me do it one morning, her expression frozen, as if she couldn't believe the indifference she had once weaponized had finally turned against her. Her father called me the following weekend. His tone was different, less gentle, more direct. He said he'd heard there was tension in the marriage, asked me to tell him what was really going on. I told him everything was fine, that there was nothing to worry about. Then I changed the subject to work, sports, anything but her. He didn't push further, but I knew he'd hang up the phone with more questions than answers. And that was the point. I wasn't just withdrawing from her. I was shifting the narrative, letting her family see the cracks without me ever lifting a finger. She wanted control, but every move she made to regain it only exposed how much she was losing. The silence grew heavier. She started pacing at night, restless, scrolling through her phone as if the right words might come to her. But nothing worked. She had played her hand at that dinner table, and she thought I would spend the rest of my time begging for redemption. Instead, I was dismantling the illusion she had built piece by piece, and she didn't even realize it until it was too late. Because the truth was simple, she hadn't embarrassed me in front of her parents. She had exposed herself, and now, I was letting her live with the echo of that mistake. By the second week, the weight of my silence had turned into something she couldn't ignore. She hovered more, always trying to catch my eye, always waiting for some flicker of emotion that never came. The nights were the hardest for her. I could hear her shifting in bed, her breathing uneven, as if she wanted to speak but couldn't bring herself to. I lay there still, calm, untouched by the storm she was building inside herself. Then she tried something new. One evening, I walked in from work to find the house spotless, dinner on the table, candles lit. She was dressed in the kind of outfit she hadn't worn in years, her hair done like she was going on a date. She smiled too brightly, said she thought we could have a night together. I sat down, ate the food, thanked her politely, and went upstairs without another word. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor as I left told me she hadn't expected that. She thought she could bait me back into the life she controlled. Instead, she was staring at the emptiness she had created. The next morning, she tried again, but this time with force. She cornered me in the kitchen, asked why I'd been so distant, accused me of punishing her. Her voice shook even as she raised it. I looked at her calmly, sipped my coffee, and said nothing. That silence hit harder than any argument. She broke first, slamming her cup down and storming off. Later that week, she tried to flip the script. She called her sister, loudly enough for me to hear from the next room, complaining that I was cold, that I was acting strange, that she didn't know what had gotten into me. She wanted me to react, to defend myself, to rejoin the performance. I didn't move. I let her weave her story, and when she hung up, she came to me expecting a confrontation. Instead, I walked past her without speaking, my keys in hand, and left the house. That night, she texted me a photo of us from years ago, smiling at a summer barbecue. She wrote, "We were so happy then." I looked at it once, locked my phone, and went back to sleep. She thought nostalgia would drag me back. But memories are only powerful when both people still believe in them. What she didn't understand was that I wasn't withdrawing to punish her. I was preparing for the day when she'd realize that all the small threads tying her life together had been cut quietly, one by one. And by then, there would be nothing left for her to hold on to. Because I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the silence she created, and now it was swallowing her whole. By the third week, her confidence had evaporated. The smirk she wore at her parents' dinner table was gone, replaced by restless pacing and forced attempts at closeness. I could feel her watching me when I came home late, waiting for me to slip, to reveal some crack in the armor. But there was nothing left to reveal. I had stopped playing the role she had written for me, and she was terrified. One night, I found her sitting at the kitchen counter with 2 glasses of wine already poured. She looked up quickly, her eyes searching mine, and said she thought we should talk. I sat down across from her, picked up the glass, and took a single sip. She began speaking fast, her words tripping over each other. She said she didn't mean what she'd said at dinner, that it came out wrong, that her parents misunderstood. She said she still cared, that she wanted us to find our way back. Her voice cracked halfway through, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her desperation. I put the glass down, stood up, and left the room without a single word. Behind me, I heard her whisper my name, small and broken, but I didn't turn back. The following days were filled with her attempts to claw back what she had lost. She cooked dinners, sent texts full of hearts and apologies, left notes on my pillow. I responded to none of it. When she reached for my hand on the couch, I shifted slightly and let her fingers close around nothing. When she tried to kiss me before work, I turned my head and let it land on my cheek. Every rejection was quiet, deliberate, and final. She began to unravel in front of me. She stayed up late at night scrolling through her phone, her hands trembling, her face lit by the glow of a screen she stared at without seeing. She texted me from the other room. Little messages like, "Are you mad at me?" or "Can we talk?" I didn't ignore them. I answered with one word, always calm, always controlled. "No. Busy. Later." Words so thin they cut deeper than any argument. And with each passing day, she lost a little more of the control she once flaunted. The woman who thought she could humiliate me in front of her family was now the one drowning in silence. The silence she had built, the silence she thought I would never survive. But I wasn't just surviving. I was building my exit. And soon, she would see what it really meant when I stood up from that dinner table and never sat back down. By the 4th week, her mask was gone. She no longer pretended to be calm or composed. Instead, she hovered like a shadow, always watching, always second-guessing. She started asking strange questions, where I'd been, who I was with, why I stayed late. Her tone wasn't casual anymore. It was tight, brittle, edged with panic. I answered each one with the same steady calm. Out. People. Work. Each response a locked door she couldn't pry open. One night, I caught her in my office. She had my desk drawer open, papers scattered, her hands trembling as she tried to put them back before I walked in. She froze when she saw me, stammered something about looking for stamps. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, collected the papers slowly, and closed the drawer. Then I walked past her without a sound. That silence crushed her more than an accusation ever could. She knew I knew, and she hated that I wouldn't give her the fight she was begging for. Her desperation grew louder. She began calling her friends late at night, whispering in the bedroom about how cold I'd become. I could hear the panic in her voice as she told them she thought I was planning something. She was right, but she would never know the details until it was too late. The mistake came 2 nights later. She tried to corner me with tears. She stood in the hallway, blocking my way, demanding to know if I was leaving her. Her eyes were red, her voice shaking, her body trembling like she was finally breaking under the weight of her own arrogance. I stared at her for a long moment, then stepped around her without a word. That was all it took. She collapsed against the wall, sobbing, the sound echoing through the house. And as I lay in the guest room that night, her cries muffled through the walls, I felt nothing. No guilt, no pity, only clarity. She thought humiliation was a game, that control was a weapon only she could wield. But now she was learning what it felt like when silence becomes sharper than any blade. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't desperate. I was patient, precise, removing myself piece by piece from the life we once shared. By the time she realized the truth, there would be nothing left to salvage. Because the man she mocked in front of her parents was gone. The man who stood up from that dinner table had never sat back down. And the man lying awake in that quiet room was already living a life without her. The first real move came quietly, almost invisible if you weren't paying attention. I closed the shared credit card, the one she used for her endless online orders and casual indulgences. I shifted my paycheck into a private account, leaving only enough in the joint account to cover utilities. I didn't announce it. I didn't leave a warning. I simply let the silence carry it. She discovered it a few days later. Her voice cut through the house as she called my name, holding her phone in her hand, demanding to know why her card had been declined. I looked at her once, calm and unreadable, and then went back to what I was doing. The silence that followed was deafening. She tried again, louder this time, saying I couldn't just cut her off. I still said nothing. Her outrage crumbled into fear, because for the first time she realized I wasn't bluffing. That week, I began taking my clothes piece by piece to the guest room, then into my car, and eventually into a storage unit. Each trip was quiet, deliberate, precise. She didn't notice at first. She was too busy trying to bait me with dinners, with forced smiles, with nostalgia. But one morning she opened the closet and saw half of my suits gone. That's when she panicked. She asked me what was happening, her voice thin, desperate, trembling. I told her nothing had changed. And technically, it hadn't, because I had already left her the moment I stood up from that dinner table. She tried everything after that. She showed up at my office unannounced, pretending to bring me lunch. She called mutual friends, asking if I'd been acting strange, painting herself as the concerned wife. But every move she made only exposed the cracks further. People began to notice, not because I told them anything, but because my absence spoke louder than her words. One evening, she attempted her final play. She stood at the door when I came home, tears already on her cheeks. She whispered that she was sorry, that she didn't mean any of it, that she couldn't lose me. Her voice shook as she reached for my hand. I let her fingers touch mine for a brief second before pulling away. Then I walked past her, my bag in hand, and headed to the guest room. Her sobs filled the hallway that night, muffled but sharp, carrying through the silence like the echo of a mistake too late to fix. And I lay there, calm, steady, untouched, knowing the end wasn't near. It was already here. Because she thought the dinner table was her stage. She thought I was the punchline. But now she was the one performing for an audience that had already left the room. The final morning came without announcement. The sky was gray, the air heavy, the kind of silence outside that mirrored the silence I had been cultivating inside for weeks. I woke early, earlier than usual, and moved with precision. Documents already sorted, clothes already gone, finances already sealed away. All that remained was the shell of a life I no longer belonged to. She stirred as I moved through the house. Her voice called softly from the bedroom, fragile, uncertain. She asked if I was leaving for work. I didn't answer. I picked up the last bag by the door, the weight of it nothing compared to the weight I had already dropped. She appeared in the hallway, her hair tangled, her eyes wide with panic. She whispered that we could fix it, that she would change, that she didn't mean what she said that night at her parents' table. Her words spilled over themselves, frantic and desperate. I stood there, calm, steady, letting her fill the air with apologies that no longer mattered. Then I looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, she seemed smaller than she had ever been. Not the woman who smirked in front of her parents. Not the one who thought she held all the power. Just someone broken by her own choices. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply set the keys on the counter and walked to the door. She followed, her voice cracking as she begged me to wait, to talk, to give her another chance. I opened the door, stepped outside, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift completely. Behind me, I could hear her sobbing, her voice calling my name like it was the only thing she had left. But I didn't turn back. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove away. Not fast, not reckless, calm, deliberate, final. In that silence, I realized something. She had thought the worst thing I could do was yell, fight, or beg. She thought leaving me in humiliation would break me. But what she never understood was that true power doesn't come from noise. It comes from absence. I never raised my voice. I never lifted a hand. I simply left. And now she would live in the echo of that decision, replaying it over and over. The memory of me walking out lasting longer than any apology she could ever invent. Because in the end, she was right about one thing. Listening to her heart and choosing me had been a mistake. But her greater mistake was believing I would stay after she told the world she regretted it. I didn't disappear. I just stopped being hers. And that silence will haunt her louder than any words ever could. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.